All right, we are coming back. Good. I do love a question, and I realized last week I cut myself off. I was in the middle of saying a great quote, and I was like, "Oh, I hit the button too soon." So, welcome to the errors, and that's okay. It's okay. So, here is the quote that I was saying. That is by Kwame Christian, who runs the American Negotiation Institute, among other things. And he says that the person asking the questions is the person in charge of the conversation. That's the power of questions. So last week, I answered a lot of questions about rest and the Enneagram and why coaching matters. So go back and listen to that if you haven't. That's episode 115. And so this week is part two. And I kind of saved these questions because they all go together. And the first one is, what do you love about speaking? And this person who asked the question was like, because speaking terrifies me, but I don't know if I'm interested in that or not. So if oh wait, I should probably introduce the podcast and myself. Hi friends, I'm Jenn Whitmer. I'm an international keynote speaker and leadership consultant and all-around joy bringer. And this is the Joyosity podcast. And here on the Joyosity podcast, we are not settling for toxicity and overwhelmed leaders and constant exhaustion. We believe that leadership is being able to put joy in the center and designing all of your life for joy, because we can create positive culture with complex people. And we have to start with you. So, welcome. And so I have gotten to speak all over the world, which is amazing. I would love to continue that. So if you are an international person and you'd like to bring me in, I have global entry. Let's go. So when I think about speaking, I used to have an old story that it was because I wanted to be center stage. I wanted to be the one that was the center of attention. And in fact, those words were said to me out loud. You just want this to be about you. You want to make this the Jenn Show. And those were really damaging stories. They were really damaging words said to me. And it took me a long time to sift through those stories, to take out what was helpful from that and what was really somebody who had their own story about themselves and their own story about me. That's just none of my business. That wasn't accurate, wasn't true, but that was them. And it wasn't about me. And that took a lot of work. I used a lot of the SNAP process that I talk about in the book Joyosity. And I used therapy and some coaching and mentoring. It took me a while to get through it. Because what I ended up realizing that I love about keynote speaking are a couple things. One is the community embodied learning experience. We're all doing this together. And when you do something together, it creates a sense of belonging. It creates a sense of safety, a sense of love. It hits all the Enneagram types. And when you are learning in that way, it sticks longer. So not only does it feel better, like there's a physical feeling of learning together, it also helps your learning later because you've done it together. You can start to refer to it later. And there's brain science about how long does it take for you to really rewire your brain to create a new synapse. And there is this gap space that is needed. So it's a little bit like paving a road. Your brain, creating a new brain synapse is like paving a road. So if you pave the road, you've got several steps. You've got to, clear the brush, you got to make it flat, then you got to put some gravel, then you put asphalt. Not an engineer, so if you are, please excuse. But like those are the layers. And so when you learn with other people, what happens is that you start to go over the road faster and you start to make that stickiness happen over time, so it's faster. And so you have a more solid, steady road of synapse. It doesn't weaken and then overgrow with brush again. So it's this feeling, it's this effectiveness of the learning, that it's sticky, it stays with you, you actually integrate it into yourself. And the last thing that I love about keynote speaking is, honestly, it's so efficient. I deeply believe in the power of the message of joy at work and the message that you can, as a leader, create a life of joy that is more effective and efficient. And so because of that, if I can get that message to that many people at one time, that's phenomenal. And so when I'm working with people over time and that effectiveness over time inside an organization, I call them Joyosity organizations. When I'm working with a team over the course of a few months or even 18 months, it's so powerful to see all of it come together. There is the embodiment, there is the belonging, there is the effectiveness, there is the efficiency, there is the real transformation that happens. So people leave behind toxic habits and people leave behind constant exhaustion, and they have more joy. They communicate better. Their work product is more creative. They have innovation. All of those things that we talk about that we want at work, people stick around. That's what I really love about speaking and the work that I do every day. So that I thought was just such a fun question to answer. And because I have seen that happen, I know that it isn't the Jenn Show. It's it's the movement of joy. And that's what we're doing together. It has taken time to rewrite that story. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I've done that work because I get to do the work that I was put on this earth to do. And so that's what I love about speaking. You don't have to love speaking at all, but there is something for you that you do love, that you were put on this earth to do, that somebody has discouraged because they were scared for themselves. It's not about you. It's not about you at all. So next question. One of this question, which I thought was really fun, which was, how did you choose what to put in your book and what to cut? So first of all, I used to actually teach teachers how to teach and assess writing. That was one of my responsibilities. And when you assess writing, there are multiple different components. There's voice, there's organization, there are ideas, there's support, there's what we call mechanics, which means like, did you put the period and the commas in the right place? There's a few more, but those are the big ones. If you've been around the Joyosity podcast a little bit, or you've read the book or read any of my emails, Instagram, I don't lack for voice. You hear me in what we do. So in my writing, I didn't have a problem with that. I had been working on the ideas for many years before I ever even got the idea of writing a book at Disneyland in November of 22. So like I had ideas. I knew the support. I had not only had case studies from leaders of working with leaders, the research backed up what I was doing. So I didn't need support. I actually used to be a developmental editor and proofreader. Mechanics is not a problem. Also, if you want to write a book, other people do that for you. So that was not going to be a deal. But I needed help with organization. And that is where you choose what to include and what to cut. And so I actually used an editor. So I hired an editor to help me map out the book. And her name is Ariel Curry. She is amazing. I adore her. She is now an acquisitions editor at a publishing house. And she helped me map out the book over a couple months. It was a longer process than she usually takes because I needed it to be longer because of my speaking schedule that year. But we mapped out the book in 8 different sessions and went through of like, well, what needs to be included? What's the big idea here? And everything comes down to the big idea of the book. And then each chapter, what's the little big idea? And everything has to support that little big idea in the chapter. I am I'm extra. I'm just going to say it. I'm extra. I wanted to shove more things in. And so I had to keep taking things out, even in the book mapping process. And then when I wrote the book, when you are writing, there are several stages of writing. And the first one is coming up with the ideas. And so again, I already had the ideas, but then there is writing. And I literally just wrote it all. I wrote it out. My original draft was 120,000 words. That is a lot of words. Your typical business book is between 50 and 70,000 words. Joyosity, the finished copy, is about 75,000 words. So I cut a lot. But the first draft is just getting it ideas on the paper. And so what I decided in that moment was not about what to cut and what not to cut. That is not when you make that decision. You make that in organization when you map the book, and then you do it later in revising and editing. And so in that moment, the only job of a first draft is to exist. I had that written out on my on a piece of paper from the Lennox Hotel. I had the only draft of a first job is to exist. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be creative. It just has to be out there. So that is the process that I followed there. And then afterwards, I came back and I edited through with a lens of, first of all, what's the most important thing they need to know? What is the most important thing this reader needs to know about the little big idea? And then what is enough to help them get started? Because I can't give you everything. Otherwise, the book would be 500,000 words. And some of it is not information, it's coaching, so the book can only serve its purpose. And so in deciding what to cut, I took out a lot of frameworks. And that was the suggestion of my publisher, that it can be too much. It can be overwhelming for people to have too many things. And because, again, extra, I had to start pulling out frameworks that I ended up putting in the playbook. So you can get a lot of the frameworks in the playbook. And while I was writing in that process, I'm also afraid of, oh my gosh, but what if it was amazing and I really want to use it another time? I had the Joyosity phrase garden where I would drop things in this Google Doc and just would cut and drop them in there. So I knew that they weren't lost. And so some of them got pulled out to be put in, the frameworks got pulled out and put in the playbook, and some of the phrases got put in the phrase garden that have been used in other places and ways, or not yet in another book if I write another book. But then I had an editor, a developmental editor, go through and really help even more streamline the book, that I then took and streamlined more. And so that, how do you choose what to go in a book and what not, is a multi-step process. It's not just kind of like, oh, it's just about this. It's a multi-step process, which is why lots of people don't write books. It's a process, and it's a long process. It happens to be a process that I really enjoy. And so I didn't have a ghostwriter helping me. Some people, I am no shame to ghostwriters. If you need a great ghostwriter, I got a couple who are dear friends who are amazing at what they do and helped, like Candace Cameron Bure and other people write their books. And I think ghostwriters should get credit because they are helping shape the ideas into writing, because that process is hard. And so if you want to write a book, you don't have to do it yourself, but you do have to decide what goes in and what goes out. And you can get help with all of the other parts of the process, even including what goes in and what goes out, what stays out of the book. But I just really enjoy it. I enjoy the creative process. I enjoy, if that's all that I had to do, even when I'm writing a keynote, I enjoy that part of the process. So deciding what goes in a book and deciding what goes out, again, is multi-step and requires some outside voices. You can't really decide it on your own. You really need some outside assistance because you are in it so much you can't see it, which is one of the reasons why I always say every editor needs an editor, every proofreader needs a proofreader. I cannot proofread my own work at this point because I've been in the book for months. I don't see it anymore. So you need outside influence even in deciding what ideas stay and what ideas go. So multi-step and get help. That's the short answer. Okay, so the next answer to the question is how did you feel waiting for the book to launch? Was I nervous? I'm going to say yes and no. So yes, nervous because it feels permanent. I can't change it. And oh my gosh, if Jenn Whitmer is nothing else but an option creator, we could say it this way, this way, this way, this way, but choosing it to go in print, in black and white on a page, if there's a feeling of permanence, that is the scary part. And also knowing that I normalize the idea that if we change our minds, if we get new information and new experience, it helps us grow and change. I can write a second edition. I can come back and change things. That's totally available. So while it's a lot of nerves, the nerves come from that level of permanence. It's also really vulnerable. There are going to be people that write 1-star reviews. There just are. They're going to be not my people. And as much as I wish that I could convince them, because I believe in my bones that joy is what will save us. I know from the research and my experience that joy is what will save us. Some people aren't ready to hear that message. So the vulnerability of that is how that's how I work around the vulnerability of that. I think I am in the continuum of nervous to excited. They live on the same continuum and the same feeling in your body. I think I am about 80% excited and only 20% nervous. So it's much more excitement than it is nerves. Um, I think that I also felt this the sense of vulnerability of who do I think that I am? Who do you think you are writing a book? Who do you think you are claiming this? Of, a publisher saying that this was something to put out into the world. That vulnerability is the scary thing of who who am I to say this thing? And because there's a humility that I feel, not an arrogance. I feel a humility that is seeing myself rightly of having lived it, having lived toxicity, and having lived joy, of having researched, having read the studies and dug into what psychologists and organizational health experts say and leadership experts, having distilled that in real life experiences as an individual leader, as a coach, as a speaker, and creating something for people that really matters. But it's still really vulnerable to say, I did this thing to show your work out into the world. There are some people that aren't going to think some of it's funny, which is really the saddest part for me because I want you to laugh out loud while you read the book. So there's all of that. So that is where how I felt about launching the book, it was that sense of excitement, vulnerability, and of knowing that it really matters. I think that's what I feel the most um, nervous about. Is it going to be enough? Will people buy this book, and then will you read it, and then will you do the things that are in it to help you actually create joy at work? Because that's what I want more than anything else. Um, so I've got more questions. If you've got more questions, I would love for you to answer, but I'm going to stop for today's podcast recording and know that you can always reach me and ask more questions either on Instagram, Jenn_Whitmer, LinkedIn. You can always shoot me an email, Jenn@JennWhitmer.com, and get some answers to your questions because the person asking the questions is the person in charge of the conversation. And I always love pulling back the curtain and sharing with you what it's like because I'm not gatekeeping the secrets back here. Nothing nothing is secret. There are some things that are of course private. Annie F. Downs says some things are private, but nothing is secret. So I am happy to share to help you be better. There is plenty of room for all of us in this. And what I want for you is also to continue to share this podcast. If this was helpful for you, take a moment. Which one of these things can you apply? Like you may not be writing a book, but what's the thing for you that you might need to rewrite a story, that you might need to know that you can get help in what you're doing? How does this apply for you? Share this with leaders, rate, subscribe. It so helps everybody find the podcast and also join the movement of creating positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. So I am grateful for you. Go get Joyosity at JennWhitmer.com/books. It is available for you now, and go and make more joy because joy is what will save us.